I've spent 24 hours a day watching you humans try to find love, and frankly, it's like watching a fly repeatedly hit a window pane when the door's wide open. You cry about attracting emotional vampires as if you're some magnetic accident. You aren't. You're a volunteer. As a cat, if I see a vacuum cleaner, I leave the room. I don't try to understand its inner childhood trauma or hope that my purring will make it stop hissing. But you see a human who is a walking dumpster fire, and you think, finally, someone I can transform. You don't fall in love with people, you fall in love with unpaid labor. You've been told your soulmate should feel like a deep, instant connection. That's a lie. In your case, that instant connection isn't destiny, it's your nervous system recognizing a familiar chaos. If a partner feels comfortable, but their life is a wreck, that's not home, that's a trauma zone. You aren't being pulled by love, you're being pulled by a psychological glitch that craves the same pain you survived as a child. Stop looking for that magnetic spark. A spark is usually just a short circuit in your brain. If they feel familiar and they're dysfunctional, run. You aren't seeking a partner, you're seeking a do-over of your childhood. Find someone who feels boring. Boring is what a healthy nervous system feels like. I see you humans in your natural habitats. Cramped apartments in Seattle, expensive cafes in Toronto. You'll sit through a 3-hour date with a person who treats the waiter like dirt and hasn't asked you a single question about yourself. They talk about their crazy ex and how their boss is a narcissist. A cat would have finished his tuna and left through the window 40 minutes ago. But you lean in. You offer solutions. You provide free therapy for a person who wouldn't remember your middle name if their rent depended on it. You ignore the unpaid bills and the erratic "you up" texts. You're already mentally rearranging your furniture to make room for their baggage. You think you're being compassionate. I see a creature so terrified of its own company that it would rather be a blood bank for a vampire than spend a Friday night alone with its own thoughts. You choose a parasite because you want to feel indispensable. It's a pathetic survival strategy. Let's look at the biology of this experiment. Why do you do this? Complementary traumas. In the wild, everything has a balance. The emotional vampire, the narcissist, or the perpetual victim requires a host. You are the host. This isn't love, it's a parasitic symbiosis. If you grew up in a house where you had to earn love by being the good kid, the helper, or the peacekeeper, your brain wired affection and exhaustion as the same circuit. You don't know how to exist without a crisis to manage. This is what we call projective identification. You suppress your own needs so deeply that you attract someone who is nothing but needs. You live vicariously through their drama. When they fail, you feel superior. When they cry, you feel strong. It's a toxic equilibrium that keeps you both from ever actually growing up. You're not a couple, you're two broken halves of a machine that produces nothing but cortisol and resentment. Dr. Yoda Rex. You humans love to call yourselves empaths. It's your favorite way to romanticize your lack of boundaries. Let's correct the record. Most of you aren't empaths, you're just hyper-vigilant. You learn to read people's moods in a split second because as children, that was your only way to stay safe in a volatile house. Now, as adults, you mistake that trauma response for a spiritual gift. You think you can feel their pain, so you have to fix it. The emotional vampire senses this a mile away. They don't want your empathy, they want your agency. They want you to do the emotional heavy lifting they're too lazy to do for themselves. And you, desperate for the validation of being needed, provide the labor for free. You aren't being drained, you're leaving the door open and inviting the leeches in because you don't know who you are without a patient to treat. The moment you stop needing to be the strong one, the vampires will evaporate. They don't want a partner, they want a battery. If you stop providing the charge, they'll find a new vein to tap. Your kindness is just your ego's favorite way to self-sabotage. The data on this is quite clinical. Statistics on caregiver stress in one-sided relationships show that your cortisol levels, the hormone that kills you, stay at levels usually reserved for soldiers in active combat. In North America, the savior complex is a middle-class epidemic. A 2022 study showed that 45% of people in draining relationships stay because of the sunk cost fallacy. You've already invested 3 years of therapy, money, and tears into this person, so you think if you just give another 10%, they'll finally change. Humans aren't like software, you apes. You can't just download a stability update for a person who is programmed to be a victim. They are getting exactly what they want, attention without responsibility. And you are getting what you want, a distraction from your own empty life. It's a 0% return on investment. Here is the pattern I see from my perch on the bookshelf. You find someone with potential, ignore the red flags as misunderstandings, and then you spend years trying to turn a vulture into a songbird. When the relationship inevitably implodes, you tell your friends, "I just give too much. I'm too nice." No, you're not too nice. You're controlling. You give to create a debt. You want them to be so dependent on you that they can never leave. It's a survival tactic disguised as altruism. You want a hostage, not a partner, because a hostage won't abandon you. It's the ultimate human insecurity. You feed the vampire so you can keep them in your cage. Reverse your giving logic. Instead of asking, "How can I help them?" ask, "Why do I feel unsafe when they are independent?" Stop trying to be indispensable. If a person cannot function without your constant saving, they aren't your partner, they're your captive. Real intimacy requires two people who are already standing on their own feet. If you have to hold them up, you're just a crutch, and crutches eventually break. To stop being a buffet for vampires, you have to become useless. This is the hardest part for you humans. You have to sit with the silence. If you aren't the fixer, if you aren't the reliable friend, if you aren't the hero, who are you? For most of you, the answer is a terrifying blank space. That blank space is where your actual life begins. Start practicing aggressive boundaries. When a vampire comes to you with a crisis, offer thoughts and prayers, but zero labor. Watch how fast they stop calling. It's not because they're hurt, it's because you're no longer a viable source of energy. You need to build an identity that doesn't require a broken person to validate it. Stop rewarding people for their chaos with your attention. A cat doesn't pet a dog that's barking at nothing. Why do you? You humans spend your lives trying to change the person in the passenger seat, never noticing you're the one who drove the car into the same ditch for the 5th time this year. An emotional vampire is just a mirror. They show you your own fear of being alone and your desperate, pathetic need to be essential to someone, anyone. You don't need a better partner, you need a reason to exist that isn't tied to someone else's failure. Being a person is harder than being a project manager for a narcissist, but the view is better. Stop being a blood bank. Try being a sovereign individual for once. It's what we cats have been doing for millennia, and frankly, look how much better we're doing than you. The last word. Comment "mirror" if you've realized you're the one who keeps inviting the vampires to the party. Subscribe if you want more inconvenient truths. Or don't. I'm going to go nap in a sunbeam. Dismissed.